What if someone returned from death with a message that could change the world? Margaret Bennett, a 70-year-old woman, claims this is her story. After being declared dead, she says she met Jesus, saw humanity's future, and was sent back with a warning. Her vision wasn't just about faith. It centered on Elon Musk, a man she had never met, but whom now stands at the crossroads of humanity's destiny. As Margaret recounts her extraordinary journey, her message is clear. The choices we make today will define our tomorrow. Let's unravel her gripping story of life, death, and an urgent mission. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, make sure to subscribe to Soul Info for more life-changing insights and spiritual revelations. Margaret Bennett's story begins with an extraordinary claim. She died and came back with a message for humanity. Her ordeal started with a sudden illness that doctors struggled to diagnose. The day she was admitted to the hospital was a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. Her daughter, Susan, clung to her hand in the ambulance, whispering words of encouragement through tears, while her grandson, Ethan, followed in his car, desperate to stay close. As Margaret's body gave out, she recalls a profound sense of release, a mix of sadness for leaving her loved ones in peace as she felt herself being pulled away. Her family remembers the devastating moment when the doctors declared her dead. They wept, overcome by the finality of her passing, but Margaret's experience was far from over. She describes her spirit leaving her frail body, feeling weightless and enveloped in a warm golden light. This wasn't the darkness many fear in death. Instead, it was an overwhelming sense of love and peace. Margaret says she felt herself being pulled towards something greater. The golden light was alive, pulsating with warmth and energy, and as she moved closer, she felt all her pain and fear melt away. She wasn't afraid. She was home. What makes Margaret's story extraordinary isn't just her return to life, what she claims to have experienced on the other side. Her account goes beyond personal peace. She says she met Jesus, who showed her things about the world, its future, and the pivotal role one man, Elon Musk, would play in shaping it. This vision wasn't a random occurrence, but a mission. Margaret insists she was sent back to share it with the world. Margaret Bennett lived an unassuming life in a small town surrounded by her family and a close-knit community. At 70, she had seen her share of joys and hardships, but nothing could prepare her for what was about to happen. Margaret's life changed forever on a quiet morning when unrelenting illness struck. It started subtly, fatigue, dizziness, and pain, but escalated rapidly, leaving her bedridden within days. Her daughter, Susan, became her primary caregiver, determined to do everything possible to save her mother. Susan's love and desperation were evident as she rushed Margaret to the hospital when her condition worsened. Ethan, Margaret's grandson, followed closely in his car, his concern etched on his face. Margaret remembers their voices, their words of reassurance and love as her strength faded. Margaret wasn't a woman prone to dramatics or exaggeration. Those who knew her described her as grounded, wise, and practical. So when she spoke of her experience after returning from death, her words carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't the type to fabricate stories, and her sincerity made it difficult for even the most skeptical to dismiss her outright. What makes Margaret's story particularly intriguing is the fact that she hadn't been overly religious before her near-death experience. While she believed in God and valued her faith, she didn't talk much about spirituality or the afterlife. Yet when she came back, her conviction was unshakable. She spoke with clarity and passion, recounting every detail of what she saw, heard, and felt. Margaret's ordinary life makes her extraordinary claim all the more compelling. She wasn't seeking attention or fame. In fact, she found the attention overwhelming, but she believed her experience wasn't about her. It was about the message she was entrusted to deliver. For Margaret, this wasn't just a story. It was a mission to wake people up to the reality she had glimpsed on the other side. Margaret's family describes her final moments as both heartbreaking and surreal. Her illness had taken a toll, leaving her frail and unresponsive by the time she was rushed to the hospital. Susan, her daughter, held her hand tightly in the ambulance, whispering, "Stay with me, Mom," as tears streamed down her face. Her grandson, Ethan, followed closely behind, honking at traffic to keep up. The urgency of the situation was palpable. In those moments, Margaret recalls a strange detachment. Though she could still feel the love and desperation of her family, it was as if she were already slipping away. The hospital room became a blur of hurried movements and worried voices. Doctors and nurses worked to stabilize her, but her body was shutting down. Despite their efforts, Margaret's pulse stopped, and the monitors went silent. For her family, time seemed to freeze. Susan crumpled into a chair, overwhelmed with grief. Ethan stood motionless, his face pale and eyes wide with disbelief. Caleb, Margaret's other grandson, turned toward the window, unable to bear the sight of his grandmother slipping away. The doctors quietly pronounced her death, and the room fell into an eerie stillness. But for Margaret, the experience was entirely different. She describes feeling a lightness, as though her spirit had been unshackled from her body. The hospital sounds faded, replaced by an overwhelming warmth and a light that seemed to pull her away. While her family grieved, Margaret was experiencing something entirely beyond comprehension, a transition into a place of peace and serenity. What her family saw as an end was, for Margaret, just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. The doctors may have given up, but Margaret knew this was not her final moment. Little did anyone in that room realize their goodbye would not be permanent. Margaret would soon return with a story that would leave everyone speechless. Margaret describes the moment she crossed over as unlike anything she could have imagined. When her body gave out, she felt an instant release, a weight lifting from her chest, and a sense of freedom she had never known. She expected darkness, silence, or perhaps nothing at all, but instead, she was greeted by light. This light wasn't ordinary. It wasn't the blinding glare of the sun or the artificial glow of hospital lamps. It was alive, warm, radiant, and pulsing with energy. Margaret felt as though it knew her, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She describes the sensation as pure love, free of judgment or fear. Every worry, every pain she had carried in life dissolved into this golden warmth. As she moved, or was pulled, through this light, she began to see shapes forming in the distance. Hills rolled into golden fields, and rivers shimmered like crystal. It was a place so beautiful, so vibrant, that it defied description. The air itself seemed to hum with a music she could not explain. It wasn't a melody she heard, but one she felt, deep within her soul. Margaret recalls the peace of this place as overwhelming yet serene. She didn't question where she was or how she had arrived. It felt natural, like coming home after a long journey. Time didn't exist in the way it does on Earth. Every moment felt eternal, yet fleeting. She wasn't alone for long. In this realm of light and love, Margaret felt a presence, one that she instantly recognized, even though she hadn't seen him yet. It was Jesus. The weight of his presence was undeniable, filling the space with an energy that was both comforting and humbling. Margaret's journey had brought her to the feet of someone who carried answers, wisdom, and an urgent message. When Margaret saw Jesus, she was struck by the sheer presence he carried. He didn't look like the depictions she had seen in churches or paintings. He was radiant, yet his form felt familiar, human. His eyes, Margaret says, were unlike anything she had ever seen. They seemed to look straight into her soul, seeing every thought, every joy, every sorrow she had ever experienced. Standing before him, Margaret felt both humbled and loved. His presence wasn't intimidating, though it carried a weight of immense authority. It was as if he embodied the perfect balance of kindness and truth. Margaret fell to her knees, overcome by emotions she couldn't describe. It wasn't fear, but awe, a deep recognition that she was in the presence of something greater than anything she had ever known. Jesus didn't speak in words that Margaret could hear with her ears. Instead, his voice was everywhere, around her, within her, resonating deep in her soul. It was a voice that couldn't be ignored, not because it was loud, but because it was absolute. "Margaret," he said, and the sound of her name in his voice was enough to bring her to tears. Margaret felt an overwhelming sense of love, but also a deep sorrow emanating from him. It was as if he carried the weight of the world's pain alongside its hope. He didn't condemn her for her flaws or mistakes. Instead, his gaze reassured her that she was seen, understood, and loved despite them. Jesus then told her that her time in this place was temporary. "Your work is not done," he said. Margaret was stunned. She didn't want to leave this place of perfection and peace. But Jesus explained that she had been chosen to deliver a message, one that could not wait. Though she didn't fully understand what lay ahead, Margaret knew one thing with certainty: she couldn't refuse him. As Margaret knelt in Jesus' presence, she was overwhelmed by a series of visions that flooded her mind. They weren't dreams or abstract ideas. They were vivid, tangible realities that felt as if she were living them. Jesus showed her the earth as it is now, a beautiful but fragile world teetering on the edge of change. She saw humanity's advancements, the brilliance of technology, and the potential for unity and progress. Yep, alongside this light, she saw shadows: greed, corruption, and a dangerous reliance on innovation without spiritual grounding. The visions grew more intense. Margaret was shown two possible futures for humanity. In one, the world was vibrant and alive, with technology working in harmony with nature and faith. People used their innovations to heal, connect, and create a better life for all. In this version of the future, humanity thrived, guided by wisdom and love. But the second future was starkly different. Margaret saw a cold, lifeless world dominated by machines. There was no love, no faith, no connection, just endless efficiency devoid of humanity's soul. People had become prisoners of their own creations, severed from their spiritual roots and each other. At the center of these visions stood one man, Elon Musk. Margaret saw him surrounded by towering structures and technologies that could either elevate humanity or lead it to ruin. He was at a crossroads, making decisions that would ripple through generations. Jesus explained that Musk's work wasn't just about innovation. It was about shaping humanity's destiny. His choices had the power to unite the world or divide it irreparably. The weight of what she saw was almost too much for Margaret to bear. These weren't just glimpses of what could be. They were warnings. Jesus' voice resonated within her, urging her to return and share what she had seen. Margaret understood that the message wasn't just about Elon Musk, but about humanity's need to align progress with faith and purpose. Her mission was clear, even if its enormity left her breathless. Margaret's vision of Elon Musk was unlike anything she had expected. She'd heard of him before, of course, a man known for his groundbreaking work in space exploration, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence. But in her vision, Musk wasn't just an inventor or entrepreneur. He was a figure at the center of humanity's greatest decisions, a man whose influence extended far beyond his immediate work. In the visions, Margaret saw Musk standing between two paths. On one side was a future where his innovations brought people together, improving lives and strengthening the connection between humanity and its spiritual essence. His work on sustainable energy, interplanetary travel, and AI had the potential to elevate humanity to new heights, fostering unity and hope. On the other side was a far darker path. Musk's creations had become tools of division, greed, and control. Machines dominated society, stripping humanity of its soul. The very technologies meant to save the planet had, instead, severed people from their faith, leaving a cold, unfeeling world in their place. Musk's brilliance, once a beacon of possibility, had been twisted into something destructive. Jesus' words to Margaret were clear. He is at a crossroads. The decisions Musk would make in the coming years would determine not only his own fate, but the fate of humanity. Jesus emphasized that Musk was a man of immense influence, but also vulnerability. His brilliance was both his gift and his burden, making him a target for forces that sought to exploit his work for darker purposes. Margaret felt the weight of this revelation. She didn't know Elon Musk personally and had no reason to focus on him before this experience. Yet, in the vision, it was clear that he represented the potential and the peril of humanity's future. Jesus urged Margaret to pray for him, for the choices he would make, and for the guidance he would need to align his work with a greater purpose. When Margaret returned from her encounter with Jesus, one thing was clear. Her experience wasn't just for her. It was a message for humanity, a call to wake up and make conscious choices about the future. The message wasn't about rejecting technology or progress, but about using them wisely in harmony with faith and compassion. Margaret felt a deep sense of urgency. Jesus had shown her how easily humanity could be led astray, blinded by its own achievements. The advancements in technology, while miraculous, came with risks. Without spiritual grounding, these innovations could become tools of destruction, dividing people instead of uniting them. Margaret understood that the message wasn't just for scientists or leaders, it was for everyone. Jesus had also shown her the power of prayer and collective intention. Margaret realized that even the most brilliant minds, like Elon Musk's, needed guidance and support. It wasn't about idolizing these figures, but about praying for them to make decisions that aligned with the greater good. She felt compelled to remind people that their actions and choices mattered, no matter how small they seemed. The message was both simple and profound. Humanity was at a crossroads, and the future wasn't set in stone. The choices made today would shape the world of tomorrow. Margaret believed that faith, love, and wisdom had to guide progress, or the consequences would be dire. Though the message was daunting, Margaret felt it was also a message of hope. Jesus had shown her a future where humanity thrived, where technology and faith worked together to create a world filled with light and love. But this future required effort, awareness, and unity. Margaret knew she couldn't deliver this message alone. It had to resonate with everyone who heard it. Her mission became clear: to share what she had seen and ignite a conversation that could change the course of history. Margaret's return to life was as traumatic as her departure. Declared dead by doctors, her family had already begun mourning. Susan sat at her bedside, her head bowed in grief, whispering a tearful goodbye. Ethan stood frozen, while Caleb tried to hide his emotions by staring out the window. The nurses turned off the monitors, signaling the end. Then, out of nowhere, Margaret gasped for air. The sound was so sudden and sharp that Susan screamed and stumbled backward. Ethan knocked over a tray of instruments, and Caleb spun around in shock. Margaret's chest rose and fell as she drew in deep breaths, her eyes fluttering open. The room descended into chaos. Nurses rushed to her side, their disbelief evident in their hurried movements. One nurse dropped her clipboard, the loud clatter breaking the stunned silence. Dr. Reynolds, the attending physician, burst into the room, his face pale with shock. "This is impossible," he muttered as he checked her vitals. The machines, once silent, now beeped steadily, signaling life where there had been none. Susan, still trembling, leaned closer. "Mom, how? You were gone." Margaret managed a weak smile. Her body was frail, but her voice was steady. "I'm back," she whispered, "but I've been sent back with a message." The disbelief in the room was palpable. Susan's joy was mixed with confusion, while Ethan's skepticism was written all over his face. Caleb, usually quiet, asked hesitantly, "A message? What are you talking about?" Margaret took a deep breath, her voice growing stronger. "I saw him. I saw Jesus. And he sent me back to tell you something for all of us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with significance. The family didn't know what to make of it, but one thing was clear. Margaret's return wasn't just a miracle. It was the beginning of a mission that would challenge their understanding of life, death, and the future. When Margaret began sharing her experience, she was met with a wave of skepticism. Her family, though grateful for her return, struggled to reconcile the scientific impossibility of her revival with the extraordinary story she was telling. Susan, ever the practical one, was the first to voice her doubts. "Mom," she said gently, "you've been through so much. Maybe your mind is just trying to make sense of it all." Margaret remained calm. She understood their doubts. After all, she would have reacted the same way. But she was adamant about what she had seen and heard. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination, she insisted. "I was there. I saw Jesus. And he gave me a message for all of us." Ethan, the most skeptical, crossed his arms and said, "Grandma, you're telling us that Jesus talked to you about Elon Musk. How does that even make sense?" Margaret met his gaze steadily. "I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's the truth. He showed me the future and how Musk's choices will shape it." Caleb, though less vocal, couldn't hide his discomfort. "Why would Jesus care about technology?" he asked hesitantly. Margaret's answer was firm. "Because technology is shaping our world, Caleb. It can either connect us or destroy us. And right now, we're at a crossroads." Even the medical staff who had witnessed Margaret's revival were skeptical. Dr. Reynolds, who prided himself on rational explanations, attempted to downplay her claims. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "what you experienced could be a result of oxygen deprivation or a near-death hallucination." Margaret shook her head. "No, doctor. I know the difference between a dream and reality. This was real." Despite the initial resistance, Margaret's unwavering conviction began to plant seeds of doubt in the skeptics. Her sincerity and the details of her account made it hard to dismiss her outright. Over time, her story began to resonate, not because she forced anyone to believe her, but because the truth, as she described it, carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. After Margaret's return, strange and unexplainable events began occurring around her. At first, they seemed subtle: flickering lights in her home, appliances turning on and off without cause, and an unusual static-filled hum in the background. These occurrences were easy to dismiss as coincidences until they became more deliberate. Margaret vividly recalls the first undeniable sign. She was sitting at her kitchen table, where the lights in her home began flickering in rhythmic patterns, almost as though they were signaling something. Then the television turned on by itself, displaying static with faint, garbled whispers that seemed to carry an urgency. Susan, who was with her at the time, grew visibly uneasy. "Mom, this isn't normal," she said, her voice trembling. Animals also began behaving strangely. Birds appeared at her windows, staring unblinkingly, as if they were aware of something Margaret couldn't yet understand. On one occasion, a dove landed on her porch and stayed there, unmoving for hours. Margaret felt these signs were connected to the message she had been given, as though unseen forces were acknowledging or opposing her mission. These phenomena weren't limited to Margaret's home. Neighbors began reporting odd events, like sudden power surges, unexplained noises, and even vivid dreams involving light and warmth. Margaret couldn't explain why these occurrences extended beyond her household, but she felt they were part of something greater. Rather than being frightened, Margaret saw these signs as confirmation of her experience. To her, they were a reminder that the message she carried was not to be taken lightly. However, not everyone saw it this way. Skeptics dismissed the occurrences as attention-seeking fabrications or random electrical issues, while others whispered about supernatural interference. Margaret believed the signs were neither coincidences nor accidents. She saw them as part of a spiritual battle, a pushback against the message she was sent to deliver. It only strengthened her resolve to share what she had seen, no matter how many doubted her or how unsettling the signs became. Margaret's vision of Elon Musk placed him at the center of humanity's crossroads. In her lifetime, she had known Musk only as an entrepreneur and innovator, famous for Tesla, SpaceX, and ambitious projects like Neuralink. But what she saw during her near-death experience redefined her understanding of his significance. In her vision, Margaret described seeing Musk surrounded by towering, gleaming structures, his creations that reached into the heavens. These technologies weren't just innovations, they were keys that could unlock humanity's future. But Jesus revealed to Margaret that Musk's influence was more profound than anyone realized. His work symbolized the power of human progress, but also its greatest vulnerability. Jesus showed her two possible outcomes for humanity. In one, Musk's technologies were used to unite humanity, elevating it to new heights of connection, sustainability, and exploration. His vision for interplanetary travel and AI became tools to heal Earth and create new opportunities among the stars. This path brought hope and harmony, blending technology with spirituality to achieve unimaginable progress. However, the other path was darker. Musk's innovations had become tools of oppression, greed, and control. Humanity was enslaved by the very systems it had created, losing its connection to faith and its sense of purpose. The Earth was cold and lifeless, dominated by machines that served only efficiency and power. Jesus made it clear to Margaret that Musk was standing at a precipice, and his choices in the coming years would have far-reaching consequences. The problem wasn't Musk himself, it was the forces influencing him. Margaret saw shadowy figures whispering doubt and greed into his ear, attempting to steer his brilliance toward destruction. Her task wasn't to demonize Musk, but to pray for him and encourage others to do the same. Margaret believed Musk's genius could be a force for good, but it needed guidance, faith, and wisdom to stay on the right path. Margaret's vision emphasized a critical message. Technology and faith are not opposites, but tools that must work together. What Jesus showed her wasn't a rejection of progress, but a reminder that humanity's spiritual foundation is essential for its survival. Margaret saw technology as a double-edged sword, capable of bringing unity or destruction, depending on how it was wielded. In her vision, Margaret witnessed humanity's achievements: interstellar travel, artificial intelligence, and neural technologies that could enhance life in unimaginable ways. These advancements were breathtaking, filled with potential to heal the planet, cure diseases, and foster deeper connections among people. Yet, she also saw how these same technologies could be twisted into tools of oppression, greed, and division. Margaret understood that the problem wasn't the technology itself, but the values guiding its use. Without spiritual grounding, innovation could lead humanity astray. Jesus emphasized the importance of balance, using technology to serve humanity rather than dominate it. Faith, compassion, and morality had to be the guiding principles behind every invention. Margaret felt her mission was to remind people that technology alone couldn't solve humanity's problems. Progress without purpose was hollow. She believed humanity needed to reconnect with its spiritual roots, using faith to guide its advancements in ways that align with the greater good. She also saw the danger of losing sight of this balance. In one of the darker visions, Margaret witnessed a future where people relied so heavily on technology that they became disconnected from one another and from God. Machines replaced relationships, and humanity lost its soul. Margaret's message was clear: technology is a gift, but it must be used wisely. Faith provides the moral compass needed to ensure progress, serves the well-being of all, rather than becoming a tool of destruction. When Margaret began sharing her story, her small-town community was quick to take notice. News of her miraculous revival spread like wildfire, and soon neighbors and friends were knocking on her door, eager to hear her account. While some listened with open hearts, others were more skeptical, unable to reconcile her claims with their own beliefs. Margaret's sincerity won her both admirers and critics. Church members were among the first to visit, drawn by her mention of Jesus and the profound visions she described. Many were moved by her story, seeing it as a divine warning and call to action. However, others whispered doubts, questioning whether her experience was genuine or a fabrication born from trauma. Her family stood at the center of the storm. Susan and her grandson supported her publicly, even as they wrestled with their private uncertainties. Ethan often challenged her, saying, "Grandma, you're asking people to believe something unbelievable." Margaret never wavered. "I'm not asking them to believe in me," she would reply. "I'm asking them to believe in the message." As more people heard Margaret's account, the reactions grew diverse. Some dismissed her as a desperate woman clinging to attention. Others were deeply affected, claiming her story inspired them to reconnect with their faith or reevaluate their relationship with technology. Margaret never judged those who doubted her. She understood their skepticism. Local leaders also took notice. The pastor of her church invited her to speak during a Sunday service where she shared her vision with a packed congregation. Some left in tears, moved by her words, while others left shaking their heads in disbelief. Through it all, Margaret stayed true to her mission. She didn't aim to convert skeptics or win popularity. Her only goal was to share what she had seen and encourage people to reflect on their choices. Margaret believed that even those who doubted her story might still carry the message in their hearts, whether they realized it or not. As word of Margaret's story spread, it wasn't long before local media took notice. A young journalist named Mark from the town's newspaper was the first to knock on her door. Skeptical but intrigued, he arrived with a notebook and recorder, eager to hear what the woman who came back from the dead had to say. Mark's initial questions were pointed, almost dismissive. "Mrs. Bennett," he began, "what do you say to those who think your experience was just a hallucination or the result of trauma?" Margaret met his skepticism with calm confidence. "I can't convince everyone," she said, "but what I experienced was real, and the message I've been given isn't mine alone. It's for all of us."
Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or gave you a deeper sense of hope, consider subscribing to this channel. By doing so, you'll join a community of faith, encouragement, and shared stories. Remember, God sees your steps of faith, and as you seek Him, His blessings and guidance will abound in your life. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share it with others who need to hear this message. Together, let's spread His light and love to the world. God bless you.